Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, Texas, Ohio State, week one of the 2025 college football season. Have we seen a better week one matchup in the last decade? Because I don't think you have. I mean, two of the biggest brands in all of college football, and still arguably the two most talented rosters in all of college football. Who has the better roster? Middle of March. Let's get into it. Straight up roster battle, position group by position group. Who's got the better team heading into this matchup? Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, Texas fans, Ohio State fans, y'all, let it fly in the comment section. By far, the best part about doing these roster battles is hearing from you guys in the comment section, whether it's getting at the boys or whether it's just mixing it up between the two fan bases. That's what college football is about. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's start it off with a banger here. Quarterbacks. Julian Sayin, we think is going to start for Ohio State. Arch Manning will be starting for Texas. What quarterback are you taking going into 2025?
I think you got to take Texas now. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's a lot of potential in that Ohio State room, not only with Julian Sayin, but also taking a player who's just a hyper talent in his own right. But you look like Arch Manning, I think, proved enough last year in the games he got to play, like that Mississippi State game and some of those others. Like, you can kind of tell he's going to be a really good player. I like the added dimension of the legs into this Texas offense, I should say. I mean, just proven. You don't really know what you're getting at Ohio State.
And look, I'm really confident in the fit that Julian Sayin is with this Ohio State offense. He's not as physically gifted as Arch Manning, right? Arch Manning, bigger arm, better athlete. But Julian Sayin, man, it doesn't get much more of a processor and a guy that's accurate with the football than Julian Sayin. And he's coming into an offense where you don't have to. We don't need you to be the engine, dude. We just need you to drive the car because you got a Ferrari around you.
Ohio State was on when Will Howard was getting the ball out quick and they were staying on schedule and being rhythmic. Like, they were really tough to stop because you just saw how good those wide receivers were. And you said it, like Julian Sayin, like, that's all you hear about him, just a really polished, smart quarterback, and that's exactly what Ohio State should want.
And Dill, you could. So I'm going to go Texas too because I think they have the best quarterback on the football field. This Ohio State quarterback room might get like as a quarterback room as a whole, because Tavian St. Clair, like, you ain't going to find many fans bigger than what this kid has all of the traits. But because you have Arch, because I think he's the best quarterback on these two teams, I'll go Texas too. Going to the running back room, you probably have to lean Texas here too, assuming CJ Baxter's back to what we saw from him as a freshman. Dill, Ohio State, it's not a bad running back room. I think Ohio State likes James Peoples going into year two. You're bringing C.J. Donaldson from West Virginia, who I think is solid, but he ain't Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. I think the Ohio State fans know that. I look at Texas, and I'm a big fan of Wisner. I'm a big fan of what we saw from Jarrett Gibson as a freshman. But Dill, I mean, you're talking about what could be one of the best running backs in the country in C.J. Baxter. I'm going to go Texas at the running back room as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of a little bit deeper probably in Ohio State. I think top end probably has more potential just because
so too.
Baxter and Jarrett Gibson. I'd probably again, CJ Donaldson, you kind of said what he is. Like, Ohio State's going to get solid production out of him, but he's not going to give him anything more, I don't think, than solid.
I think, I think he was added as a little bit more of like, we just want a veteran because we lost our two running backs who really were the only two running backs who had a ton of production. Like, we just want a guy that's carried the football at the Power 4 level. CJ Donaldson, obviously.
But if this is going to be a good room for Ohio State, James Peoples needs.
Yes, I do agree with that.
I look at Texas, like, you kind of know what you're getting. I think with CJ Baxter and Jarrett Gibson, I think can be really good.
Wisner was pretty damn good too. Wide receiver room, you got to go Ohio State. You got the best player in the country in Jeremiah Smith. You got Cardinal Tate would be a wide receiver one on 98%.
Dare I say, is this the best Ohio State wide receiver room we've seen in a while? Is that crazy? I mean, I know we've seen some good ones with like Garrett Wilson and
no, I'm with you, but depends on what you get from Brandon Inniss, who I like Ohio State's feeling great about him as their wide receiver 3. But it probably, like, if you're talking about greatest Ohio State rooms of all time, that probably is.
But you got probably the best in Jeremiah Smith. I don't think we've seen anything close to close. That's relative, but like, he's like the best wide receiver I've ever seen, I feel like. And then Cardinal Tate, I mean, he is so good.
Nobody talks about him. He's like Robin, but it is like he's a guy. And Dill, I will say this. Texas wide receiver, I think, is a lot better than people will think. I think they'll see Matthew Golden. I think they'll see Isaiah Bond leave the program. Ryan Wingo is not on that Jeremiah Smith level because Jeremiah Smith's kind of on that island. I don't think it's all that crazy to put Ryan Wingo on the Ryan Williams, Cam Coleman island. Now, he did not have the production as a freshman that Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams did, but I think that's a product of having some really good wide receivers in front of you. Ryan Wingo has the chance to be a top 10 wide receiver in the country in the 2025.
He showed some of those things, like the ability to stretch the field vertically, the ability to run with the ball after the catch. Like, that's what really, I feel like, makes Jeremiah Smith almost such a problem, is like you saw in the Oregon game in Tennessee. Like, when he gets the ball with the crack of space, he's just too big. He's too fast. Ryan Wingo kind of has some of those traits, like just that athletic.
I saw somebody talking about like Jeremiah Smith doesn't have that top end speed. It was like, I don't love to name drop. He was like 24/7 sports anchor. And I was like, you dog. I mean,
Jeremiah Smith just trying to find a hole in someone who doesn't really have holes.
Who doesn't have no holes, man. Yeah. And if you're talking about wide receiver rooms as a whole and throwing the tight end room, I think Max Claire's a guy for Ohio State as well. I will shout out DeAndre Moore, too. I mean, we're giving a ton of love to the Ohio State wide receiver room because they deserve that love. But I think this Texas wide receiver room is probably getting slept on heading into 2025 year.
Especially if one of the young guys can play well, because you kind of look, that's going to be like whether it's Cleek Lockett or Jamie French, like,
or Michael Terry.
Really good play from one of those young guys. I think you look like Ryan Wingo, to me, true number one. Really like what you have with him. DeAndre Moore out of the slot. Excellent player. I think you're right. That tight end spot's going to be huge because it has been a position that Texas has been able to rely on.
Yep.
They don't really have anyone proven. Like, they have some really talented players in Washington and Terry, but that'll be a big one, I think.
Yeah, and apparently Michael Terry is going to get looks at wide receiver right now. And I think he'll grow into a tight end. Kids, you talk about like a freak athlete. It's like Jeremiah Smith and talking about Michael Terry maybe being the second best athlete on the football field for these two teams. Offensive line. You probably just have to go Texas because you probably trust it more, right? I know because I saw Trevor Gooseby play really good when he had to come in at tackle for Texas. I look at the inside, and again, it's a lot of new faces, but you kind of trust that Texas has developed and recruited that position a little bit better. Where you look at Ohio State, I like the additions that they made in the portal. 2 tackles coming in. I think you have question marks about Austin. I think you have question marks about Heinzman at center. Because there are probably just more questions generally about the Ohio State position room in the offensive line than you do have Texas. I'm going to lean Texas here.
I mean, it's not been a unit that's played incredible football over the past couple of years, I wouldn't say.
No,
it's all relative. It's been a good offensive line for college football standards, but like compared to the rest of this Ohio State team, I think a lot of people have looked like it's lagged recruiting, it's lagged development, it's lagged straight up play on the field. So I look like Texas kind of been the opposite. I think what's really brought them to the fore is they've been elite at producing offense.
It's that offensive line is that one position, and I really like what they did with the hire because they brought in a guy that can recruit. It's that one position where it seems like Ohio State hasn't had like the pick of the litter. Like they whoever they want a quarterback, they can go get. Whoever they want at wide receiver, they will go get. Running back the same way. But it does feel like the offensive line, it's always the second, third options for Ohio State. And you have seen that lag on the football field for Ohio State as well. Switching over, Dill, to the defensive line, to me, the answers have been kind of obvious. The defensive line is very tough for me. I will kick it to you first. Ohio State, Texas defensive line, who are you rocking with here?
I got to take the Buckeyes because you can certainly question the depth. I look that front four I really like. I think Caden Curry is a very underrated player, big, tough, physical defensive end. Probably has a little bit more pass rush juice than I think some people think. But I think Edric Houston might be really I was really impressed with him in that Tennessee game, I should say.
Okay.
Him and Caden McDonald, I just think are quite a bit better than what Texas is going to throw out in the inside. Again, we're going to need to rely on some young guys to play and some guys who you don't really know anything about for Ohio State because it is a thin unit. It feels like, at least with experience, but I think their front four, their top end is a much more diverse and unique, filled out set, I guess, of skills in that room.
You left out Kenyatta. Did you say Kenyatta Jackson? Because
I think most people know. I think we've been talking about Kenyatta for a while. He's a really good player. I just look I think some of those guys that like, yeah, maybe don't on the surface have the experience or like the name recognition. But like, I think Edric Houston can be a real record.
I mean, Ohio State lost just so much production on that defensive line. And like guys and that's what, if you're an Ohio State fan, you probably feel good about, because like Kenyatta Jackson probably should have been your starter last year along with Caden Curry. But, Jack Sawyer and JTT came back to go win a national championship. So although you have not seen a ton of them because Jack Sawyer and JTT stayed an extra year, you do feel like you got some dogs there for Ohio State. I'm going to go Texas because I think they have more known commodities of guys that I think are studs. And I'm going to bet on the high upside on the defensive line. Do I have question marks about the interior of the defensive line in terms of difference makers and depth? Yeah, certainly do. We talked about Colin Simmons, who might just be the best pure edge rusher in the country going into 2025. And then you talk about Trey Moore, who's probably in the top 10 in terms of edge rushers in the country. Ethan Burke, Colton Vasek, Lance Jackson coming in, who I think will play early for Texas out there on the edge. I'm going to go bet on the upside with Texas, specifically on the edge. Going to the linebacker room, I'm probably going to go Texas too. And it starts because they got the guy in Anthony Hill Jr. To me, you're probably talking about one of the best pure linebackers in the country going into 2025. And Dill, I'm a fan of Brad Spence. I'll just raise my hand. I got him slotted in as a starter for Texas. I think he's extremely underrated coming from Arkansas. Sonny Styles is really good. I think he's one of the better linebackers in the country, but you probably have some question marks about who's up next. And what's going on with CJ Hicks is probably another question that you certainly have.
Well, what's going on with Hicks? I think Arvell Reese is kind of taking control. I think Arvell Reese, when he got his opportunities to play, played
he's good.
Well, like another long, athletic, rangy linebacker for Ohio State. I think you're right. I look Anthony Hill, definitely, in my opinion, the best linebacker in this room. And then I don't think like Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese as like combined, are they that much better than a Brad Spencer, Leona Lufa? I think those two players are really good too. So I think you have better top end with Anthony Hill. And then I think people almost like pretend Anthony Hill is like a one-trick pony or one-man show in that linebacker room. I think you got two guys right behind him who are really good players.
Secondary, you probably got to go. I think you go Ohio State here. I think you go Ohio State because you know a little bit more about the unit. Now, I give Texas, they revolutionized that secondary in the 2024 season. It went from a big-time weakness in 2023 to a real strength of that defense in 2024, but now you are replacing a lot of really good football players. Now, you're doing the same thing for Ohio State, but I know Davison Igbinosun is a really good cornerback. I know Jermaine Matthews is a really good cornerback. I know Caleb Downs is the best safety in the country. You really only have some question marks about what's the nickel going to look like and what's the other safety spot going to look like for Texas. Like, look, I believe in Kobe Black being a guy for Texas year two. Jelani McDonald is a souped-up athlete, but there are now that I'm thinking about it,
I'm almost like you're saying, like, you don't have a ton. Like, I think you have one unknown in that Texas backfield, and that's probably the second cornerback next to Malik Muhammad. Because Jelani McDonald came in and played a ton of football. Really, really good player. Michael Taft. I think that's huge to get him back in terms of in general.
Big blue.
And also just being like a Texas guy, which obviously you'll love in this day of college football.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably lean Ohio State just because I think Jermaine Matthew, like Davison Igbinosun, really good corner. Would like to maybe see him cut the penalties down a little bit.
Yes.
But Jermaine Matthews, I feel like he's like it. I almost thought he probably should have been playing more last year.
Yeah, but where is he going to play? Like, I mean, they were so good.
I know Burke's really good, but like Jermaine Matthews, like I think he can be like.
Yeah. Okay. I want to rephrase my answer. I'm probably still sticking with Ohio State, and it probably is like the Caleb Downs factor is putting them over the top. And again, I talk about like Jeremiah Smith and how special he is at wide receiver. The safeties don't get as much attention, but Caleb Downs is one of the better safeties I've seen play college football in a very long time. But I want to show some more respect to Texas because I think Jalen Gilbo at nickel's great. I think Malik Muhammad's very, very good and only getting better as a football player. You bring in a guy like Jonah Williams, who it is going to be hard to keep off the field with the athlete that he is. This Texas secondary, I would revise my statement. It's really damn good. I'm going to give the lean to Ohio State, but I do want to throw some respect at this Texas
These are two
secondary.
excellent units in college football.
And with
Just athletic and don't make mistakes anymore. Both I think have cut those down. I think 2 years ago, you look at them, both had those snafus where they give a big play. Those have been way cut down. Really good units, top end talent. They all tackle. These are two. These you probably take them 1, 2, 2, 1, either order in the country.
I was gonna say they're probably looking at 2 top 5 units in the country at the very least.
Top 3.
Yeah, you certainly could argue that. I mean, I think Oregon secondary will be. Yeah, you might be right. You might be right.
Oregon versus these two, please.
I'm high in Oregon secondary. I think they got some young studs.
Yeah,
all right. So this is pretty split. This game's gonna
I'd probably go Ohio State too. I don't know if I've said that, but it's
I think you lean Ohio State there in the secondary, but it's close. This is gonna be so. And they'll credit was the Texas AD who I think said is we're Texas. We want to be in these big games, and I'm sure Ohio State feels the same way. That's a dying breed in football, man. You look at Matt Rule in Nebraska, dog. Why are we playing big games? I don't know, dog. I mean, this may be college football ain't for you, Matt Rule. Credit these two teams for towing the line and going out and playing. Appreciate you guys for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.